U.S. citizens, and welcome to WWT 194.1, your number one radio show for war entertainment. My name is Aunt Sam, and I'll be your host for the hour. Today, I thought we could throw back a little bit to World War II. It may have been number 2, but it's number 1 in our hearts. I have with me 3 special guests that will be debating hot topics for you today. Their names are Bonnie, Clyde, and Kermit. These guys are here to guide us through the extremely controversial issues of World War II surrounding morality. Bonnie, Clyde, and Kermit, you are on the air. Our first topic today is the debate on dropping the bomb. U.S. President Truman said about its creation that, quote, "We have spent $2 billion on the greatest scientific gamble in history and won," end quote. Bonnie, what do you have to say about the bomb? Was it the greatest scientific win for the U.S.? Was it even justified?
Some people to this day still believe that the dropping of the atomic bomb was a justified and necessary move after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. People claim that the U.S. gave Japan multiple times to escape the wrath of the bomb. They tried to spare the people with the Potsdam Agreement, but the leaders denied it, which gave the U.S. permission to punish them. Once they made the decision to drop the bomb, the U.S. dropped 63 million leaflets across Japan, warning civilians of air raids. They read, "America asks that you take immediate heed of what we say on this leaflet. We are in possession of one of the most destructive explosive ever devised by man. Evacuate your cities." Since the U.S. tried so hard to spare the lives of so many before dropping the bomb, many were able to place the blame on the Japanese for the lives lost.
Sure, that might have been true, but many people believe that dropping the bomb was a very unjustified act. Japan was ready to surrender a few months after the warning was given out, but the surrender note was very inflexible. And Japan rejected it even though they were trying to get out of the war. Because of this, the bombing was done in order to prove to the USSR that America had a strong military. However, it wasn't worth killing so many lives. Too many lives were lost for this so-called flex of muscles. They used atomic bombs to look superior, and it was so close to the end of the war that it was futile in the overall picture. U.S. generals did not give enough time for word that they would bomb Nagasaki. If they did, many lives would be saved and the Japanese would have surrendered. The city's bombs were outnumbered, troops to civilians 6-1, showing the bomb was placed in a civilian center, which led to 250,000 dead and many crippled. With $2 billion spent on the atomic bomb, many civilians lost faith in the government spending process and didn't want to support the bomb at all.
Wow, it really seems that the morality was lowered quite a lot during World War II. Moving on, we have the debate about the internment of the Japanese, which came about because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Initially, after the bombing, many people backed the Japanese Americans, claiming that they were loyal to America. The government, however, claimed that any Japanese in the U.S. had the potential to be a Japanese spy, and large precautions were needed to be taken. They issued Executive Order 9066, which gave the military permission to intervene with the lives of Japanese Americans, creating internment camps. The government then used propaganda to change the opinion of many and cause a split view on internment camps. Kermit, do you think the Japanese internment was a justified action?
Many people, especially white businesses in Hawaii, opposed internment because of the moral issues it had, including conditions and a lack of human rights given to Japanese. Though camp conditions were not as bad as concentration camps by Hitler seen in Germany, they were nowhere near good. Many of the internees only had 48 hours at most to pack up and or sell their possessions before they were shipped off like cattle to one or many concentration camp locations. The civilian assembly centers, relocation centers, and the detention camps were all created through the War Relocation Authority and had the worst conditions: little to no plumbing or cooking areas, very weak and unsupported living areas, and were generally cramped and not clean. Internees in the Immigration Naturalization Services facilities, INS, faced slightly better conditions with facilities equivalent to that of the lowest rank of military personnel. The mental toll of being virtually held captive by Americans and having no say in how you live your life took its toll on many of the Japanese Americans.
Mainly white farmers supported internment because of wartime hysteria and race prejudices. We're charged with wanting to get rid of the Japs for selfish reasons. We do. It's a question of whether the white man lives on the Pacific coast or the brown men. They came into this valley to work, and they stayed to take over, said Austin E. Anson of the Saturday Evening Post. The bombing of Pearl Harbor caused many people to jump to conclusions about the Japanese race. They claimed that any Japanese in the U.S. had the potential to be a Japanese spy, and thus needed to take large precautions through the creation of internment camps. However, 2/3 of the interned people were American citizens, and half were children. They viewed this as a completely justified action and saw no reason why it should not be done. Those conclusions eventually proved to be wrong, because during the entire course of the war, only 10 people were convicted of being spies, and ironically, all of those 10 people were of Caucasian descent.
Again, it seems that the morality of the U.S. was lowered as we took our own citizens out of their homes and into camps due to hysteria. Our final debate topic is civil liberties at this time. Civil liberties in the 1900s were quite lackluster, similar to years before. For example, during the Civil War, Lincoln abandoned habeas corpus, a law which ensures due process of law to U.S. citizens. His doing this is an example of how the United States has always been okay with abandoning civil liberties in wartime, and World War II also showed this. During times like these, the work that had been done to better the lives of others had gone down the toilet. Which rights were compromised in World War II? Labor laws, wage insurance, human rights, right to a trial, and, of course, the rights of women and those not of Caucasian descent. But were these violations of rights justified, or were they irrational moves on the part of the government? Clyde, what do you think?
Many people thought the lack of rights for people were justified. People argued that this was a time of war, and everyone needed to pitch in to help the war cause. The rights of people needed to be saved from those who were not democratic, such as the Nazis, the fascists, and the communists. So naturally, taking away the rights of those who were undemocratic made sense. Roosevelt, among others, called for action in his third inauguration speech by saying, "Most vital to our present and our future is this experience of a democracy which successfully survived crisis at home, put away many evil things, built new structures on enduring lines, and through it all maintained the fact of its democracy." The labor done during the war was done by volunteers who wanted to help win the war. In addition to that, many people were assured a job, which made for a more productive economy.
Many felt the lack of rights for people were not justified. There was an excessive amount of discrimination in the workplace, with minority groups not receiving the same rights that white workers had. Whites established the Jim Crow laws to maintain segregation between whites and blacks. African Americans were viewed as second-class citizens, which made it difficult to find their place in the workforce and in society. The constant discrimination and lack of rights for minority groups like Japanese, African Americans, and Mexicans can be seen many times in U.S. history. However, now many people became less racist towards people of color and more racist towards the Japanese when the attack on Pearl Harbor occurred. "Before we're through with them, the Japanese language will be spoken only in hell," said Admiral Hazley. The Japanese and Germans who were being unconstitutionally arrested after World War II, the moral issue of discrimination on the African Americans had not been forgotten, and African Americans still face discrimination in the workforce. Many of the advances African Americans made seemed to disappear. However, many believe that they had more than earned their right to be treated as full citizens because of their military service and sacrifice for equal rights in society. With most of the people being discriminated against being U.S. citizens, many argued that if we were fighting for the rights of others, why were the American rights not being preserved?
Again, it is clear that the rights of those living in the World War II era were compromised. Today, through our debates of dropping the bomb, Japanese internment, and civil liberties, we have learned that the U.S.'s morality seemed to be severely lowered as we killed millions, interned our own citizens, and lowered the rights of every U.S. citizen. As every U.S. war had, this war claimed to have a moral purpose of fostering democracy. However, is the fight for democracy important enough to compromise morality? I guess it all depends on your priorities, and it's clear that the main U.S. priority was going to war for democracy. Thank you for joining us in our debates today. This is Aunt Sam signing off from WWT 194.1. Now enjoy our regularly scheduled songs.